A blood-curdling shriek ripped through the quiet suburban street. Karen, face contorted in a mask of pure rage, hammered on her neighbor's door with a fury that rattled the WiFi sign hanging askew on the opposite wall. "Open this door, you thief," she screeched, her voice cracking with unbridled anger. Her perfectly manicured nails, usually a testament to her composure, were chipped and broken, evidence of her escalating panic. Just minutes ago, her world was in perfect order. Her prized orchids were basking in the sun, her double-stuffed caramel latte was the perfect temperature, and her favorite reality TV judge was about to deliver a scathing critique on a contestant's atrocious fashion sense. Then, the internet died. Frantic, she'd reset the router. Twice. No luck. Then, the most absurd thought wormed its way into her mind. Her new neighbors. The ones who just moved in 2 doors down. The ones with color. It had to be them. They probably couldn't afford their own internet and were leeching off hers. The audacity. Fueled by righteous indignation, Karen had stormed out of her pristine home, a general marching into enemy territory. The door finally creaked open, revealing a bewildered young man in a worn-out Nirvana t-shirt. He blinked, taking in the sight of Karen, her blonde bob slightly askew, her face a terrifying shade of crimson. "Can I help you?" he stammered, taking a cautious step back. "You know exactly what you did," Karen spat, jabbing a finger accusingly at his chest. "Stealing my Wi-Fi. I should report you to..." Her tirade faltered. Report him to whom? The Wi-Fi police. The young man's confusion morphed into amusement. "Lady, I think you have the wrong idea," he chuckled, shaking his head. "I just changed my own Wi-Fi password." Karen stared at him, a knot of unease forming in her stomach. His words didn't make sense. They didn't fit her carefully constructed narrative. Then, she noticed it. A small, almost imperceptible flicker of something cold and calculating in his eyes. Something that sent a shiver down her spine. The young man's smile, a sliver of white against the dark background of his skin, struck Karen as predatory. It was a knowing smile, the kind that held a secret. Her anger, which had blazed with the righteous fury of 1,000 suns, began to flicker with uncertainty. You changed your password," she stammered, her voice losing its accusatory edge. But how is that possible? My internet is down." He shrugged, a casual movement that screamed arrogance. "Maybe your provider is having issues," he suggested, his tone laced with amusement. "Or maybe," he added, leaning closer, "you haven't paid your bill." Karen recoiled as if he'd slapped her. The very suggestion was preposterous. Her bills were always paid, meticulously, on the 1st of every month. This had to be a game, a power play. He was toying with her. "I know what you're doing," she hissed, leaning in until just a breath separated them. "You're trying to intimidate me, to scare me off. But it won't work." The young man's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Lady, I'm just trying to enjoy my Sunday morning," he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "If you'll excuse me." He began to close the door. "No." Karen's hand shot out, stopping the door with a bang. "You don't get to dismiss me. I demand you fix my internet. Right now." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, they just stared at each other, a tableau of suburban warfare. Then, a slow, chilling smile spread across his face. "Tell you what," he said, his voice a low murmur in the air. "Come inside, and I'll take a look." He stepped back, holding the door open. A silent invitation. Or was it a trap? Hesitation warred with fury in Karen's chest. Her instincts screamed at her to turn and run, to retreat to the safety of her perfectly appointed home. But something, perhaps a morbid curiosity or the sheer absurdity of the situation, compelled her forward. She stepped across the threshold into a world jarringly different from her own. Gone were the carefully curated beige tones and sterile surfaces of her existence. This home pulsed with life, the air thick with the scent of spices she couldn't place, and the faint rhythm of music that sounded vaguely tribal. A wave of dizziness washed over her. What was she doing? This was madness. Yet, she found herself following the young man down a hallway adorned with photographs of laughing strangers with skin the color of rich, dark chocolate. He led her into a small, cluttered room dominated by a computer monitor displaying lines of code that swam before her eyes. It looked like the inside of her grandson's video game console, only far more intimidating. "So," he said, swiveling in his chair to face her, "what seems to be the problem?" Karen crossed her arms defiantly. "My internet isn't working," she stated, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "And I know you have something to do with it." He raised an eyebrow, his fingers never leaving the keyboard. "And why would you think that?" "Because," Karen sputtered, "because you changed your password." Even to her own ears, it sounded ridiculous. He chuckled, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. "Ma'am," he said, turning back to his screen, "people change their passwords all the time. It's called online security. Maybe you should try it sometime." Karen felt a surge of anger, hot and stinging, replacing her momentary confusion. Online security? What did this hacker know about security? He was probably a gamer, wasting his life on violent shoot-'em-ups, stealing internet access to fuel his digital rampages. "Don't play dumb with me," she snapped, planting her hands on his desk, her manicured nails clicking against the worn wood. "You think I don't know what you're up to. You're stealing bandwidth, sucking up all the internet for your games." The young man froze, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Slowly he turned, his face now an emotionless mask. The air crackled with tension, the silence stretching thin and taut. Then, to Karen's surprise, a laugh erupted from him, a deep, rumbling sound that shook his chest. "Games?" he gasped, wiping a tear from his eye. "Lady, you think this is about games?" He shook his head, the amusement fading as quickly as it appeared. "You have no idea, do you?" Karen recoiled, a shiver crawling down her spine. His amusement had been unnerving, but this was different. This was a side of him she hadn't glimpsed before, a rawness, a barely contained intensity that set her on edge. What do you mean?" she stammered, her voice losing its usual sharpness. He stood up, towering over her. "This," he said, tapping a finger on the screen filled with code, "is bigger than you can imagine. And your internet being down, that's the least of your worries." He leaned closer, his voice a low whisper in her ear. "Unless you want to help me stop it." Karen stared at the lines of code, fear replacing her anger. It was like a foreign language, a secret message scrawled in glowing green characters. Her carefully constructed world, a world of HOA meetings and perfectly timed gardening schedules, felt miles away. "Stop what?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The room seemed to shrink around her, the air thick and heavy, suffocating. The young man stepped back, running a hand through his close-cropped hair. "I'm trying to prevent something terrible," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Something that could affect everyone. Everyone in this city, in this country." "What are you talking about?" Karen demanded, her voice rising in panic. This had to be some elaborate joke, a prank to teach the nosy neighbor a lesson. But deep down, a seed of doubt began to sprout in her mind. His intensity was too real, the fear in his eyes too raw to be faked. He pointed to the screen. "This is a virus," he explained, his voice tight with urgency. "A powerful one. It's designed to infiltrate every system, every network." "A virus," Karen echoed, her mind reeling. This was beyond anything she had ever imagined. Viruses were things you got on your computer, things Norton Antivirus took care of with a satisfying beep. Not something that could what? Destroy the world. He nodded grimly. It can cripple infrastructure, shut down power grids, even manipulate financial markets, he said, his gaze intense. Everything is connected, and this virus is the key to controlling it all. He paused, his eyes boring into hers. And they're planning to unleash it soon. They? Karen choked on the word, her carefully manicured world tilting on its axis. Who were they? A gang of hooded teenagers huddled in a basement. Foreign hackers with sinister motives. The possibilities, each more outlandish and terrifying than the last, swirled in her mind. The young man, as if reading her thoughts, let out a humorless laugh. It doesn't matter who they are, he said, his voice laced with frustration. What matters is stopping them. And I'm close, so close to cracking their security protocols, but I need more time. He began pacing the room, his energy a stark contrast to Karen's frozen state. That's where your internet comes in, he continued, his voice taking on a desperate edge. Their signal. It's strong, too strong. It's interfering with mine, creating a digital noise I can't cut through. Karen stared at him, the absurdity of the situation threatening to overwhelm her. She, Karen, queen of the cul-de-sac, embroiled in a high-stakes cyber war? It was ludicrous, impossible. Yet, the fear in his eyes, the frantic energy that seemed to vibrate off of him, held a ring of terrifying truth. What do you need me to do? She asked, her voice a mere whisper. The question, barely audible in the cracked room, felt monumental, a crossing of some invisible line in the sand. A flicker of hope sparked in his eyes. Your router, he said, moving towards her with a newfound urgency. I need to use your router. It's close enough to their signal, but isolated enough to give me a clean connection. He paused, searching her face. It's the only way. Karen's mind, a place where meticulously organized grocery lists and HOA violation reports usually reign supreme, struggled to grasp the situation. Her router, that blinking box of wires she barely understood, held the key to, well, everything, apparently. She pictured her pristine living room, the carefully arranged throw pillows, the gleaming coffee table displaying her prized collection of bone china thimbles. Now she saw it through a new lens, a mundane stage for a digital battle of epic proportions. My router. She echoed, her voice a mix of apprehension and a strange, unexpected thrill. This was madness, utter and complete madness. And yet, a part of her. A part that had laid dormant beneath years of suburban routine, reveled in the chaos. Yes, your router, he repeated, his voice softening, as if sensing her internal struggle. It's the only way to bypass their firewall, to get a clear shot at the virus. He paused, his eyes pleading. Please, ma'am, we don't have much time. He looked so young, so desperate. And for a moment, Karen saw not a stranger, not a threat, but a person in need. A surge of something unfamiliar, something akin to responsibility, washed over her. This was bigger than her fear, bigger than her perfectly ordered world. This was about saving, well, everything. Okay, she said, her voice stronger than she expected. Okay, you can use my router. The words, once spoken, hung in the air, a tangible shift in the atmosphere. The young man's face broke into a relieved smile, a flash of white teeth against his dark skin. Thank you, he breathed, his eyes shining with gratitude. He rushed to a drawer, pulling out a jumble of wires and a small, sleek device. This might take a while, he said, his fingers already flying across the keyboard, his earlier desperation replaced by a laser-like focus. But we'll stop them. I promise. Karen, feeling the strange mix of trepidation and exhilaration, could only nod, her heart pounding in her chest. She had just stepped into a world she never knew existed, a world where suburban boredom was replaced by the varied real possibility of saving the world. one Wi-Fi signal at a time. Hours melted into a blur of frantic typing, muttered code, and the insistent hum of her hijacked router. Karen, relegated to the sidelines of the digital battlefield, found herself strangely captivated. Gone were the mundane worries of her former life, replaced by the thrilling, terrifying reality unfolding before her eyes. The young man, a digital warrior hunched over his glowing screen, had explained his plan in a torrent of technical jargon that went right over Karen's head. But she understood the essence of it. He was creating a digital counter-virus, a weapon to combat the impending technological apocalypse. And then, silence. The young man sat back, his face illuminated by the screen's eerie glow. He was sweating, his eyes bloodshot, but a triumphant grin spread across his face. "It's done," he whispered, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "The virus? It's neutralized." He turned to Karen, his eyes shining with relief and a hint of something else, something that looked suspiciously like admiration. "We did it," he said, standing up and extending a hand towards her. You were amazing. I couldn't have done it without you." Karen, still reeling from the experience, hesitantly shook his hand. Her world had been turned upside down, her comfortable certainties shattered. Yet she felt exhilarated. She had played a part, a small but crucial part, in saving the world from digital annihilation. The magnitude of what had transpired settled over her. The quiet suburban street outside, her meticulously maintained lawn, they all seemed different now, imbued with a hidden significance. So, she began, suddenly self-conscious. What now? He shrugged, running a hand through his hair. "Now," he said, a playful glint in his eye, "I owe you a new Wi-Fi password." He paused. "And maybe," he added with a smile that made Karen's heart skip a beat, "you can tell me all about those HOA violations sometime." As Karen stepped back into her own home, the familiar scent of potpourri and lemon-scented cleaning products, she knew things would never be the same. The world, once predictable and mundane, now pulsed with unseen dangers and unexpected possibilities. And Karen, armed with a newfound purpose and a surprisingly attractive computer whiz kid on speed dial, was ready to face it head-on.